and I'm one of the organizers of the United County Freedom Trail Commission, among other things. And I really want to welcome you here for this 190th anniversary celebration of the Utica riot. Yes. And doesn't that sound exciting? It's really an honor to be in Mohawk Valley's oldest African American church, by far the oldest. And we've done the research and we know that it started with classes teaching children how to read. And this is still part of taking care of the community, of the mission of Hope Chapel. And it just gives me so much inspiration. I want to thank Reverend Baugh for, she found the poster from 10 years ago when we did this, and she said, let's do it again, let's do it again. And so DeAmicis and Mary Hayes Gordon and myself, who are part of the United County Freedom Trail Commission, started running on that day, and here we are. So I'm so glad that you all have come to be able to share this day with you. So here's my question. Was anybody here 10 years ago besides me? Yes, yes, oh yes, yes, okay. That's great. Mark your calendars, everybody get your phone out, mark your calendars for October 21st, 2035. Because Reverend Bob has anything to do with it, we're going to be back here again in 10 years celebrating the 200th anniversary. So just get in there, put it in there, and you can see in a couple of years, 10 years, that we'll be here. I just want to, remember, we need to remember that we stand on the land that was for thousands of years the territory of the Haudenosaunee people, their confederation, and all those people who lived and died here on this land. All around us, their names are still spoken in Utica County, Mohawk. All of that history is still there, and we're very grateful for the stewardship of this land and the contributions that they made to the region's history. They're not forgotten, they're not gone, they're alive, an important aspect of what makes New York just really great. I find that this is like a really good follow-up to the massive and unprecedented No Kings rallies that happened on Saturday. I've read a lot of comparisons of the No Kings movement to the civil rights movement of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But what we have here is a tradition that goes back 250 years. We are used to having some measure of freedom of speech and the right to freely gather. We had the promise that we wouldn't be grabbed off the street at our jobs or in prison without due process. And there's a lot of flaws in our society. I mean, the hard fact of racism, there's the police who are too quick to shoot. There's mass incarceration with prison guards who abuse the people they're supposed to be watching and sometimes treat them fatally. And we know the consequences of that just recently. And it's devastating. All of this stuff has devastated many families. The heavy hand of injustice usually falls more brutally on people of color. But what is happening right now, including the attempted political assassinations and murders, the price of food going up, of electricity going up, all of that at the same time when social services are being gutted and health insurance prices are about to jump substantially, it requires us to unite and push back in the best way that we can. With unity, we'll work with solidarity, and organizing for social change. A good friend of mine, who's no longer with us, Leslie Feinberg, used to say that we had to be the best fighters against someone else's oppression. Tonight we're going to look backwards and we're going to look forward. Think about it. Right here in Utica, Black and white women of the 18th and 19th century who wanted to see the end of enslavement founded female anti-slavery societies. They sewed, they held fairs, they composed poetry and songs, they wrote articles, they read books, they collected thousands of names on petitions against enslavement. They spoke in the public to convince and cajole. They sold subscriptions and newspapers. They collected donations of money, clothing, shoes for freedom seekers who arrived with empty hands and bare feet. They sent their supplies to Canada to help the people who had already escaped there. They fought to save their own children who might still be enslaved in the South, like Mercy Dove. They cooked food, they hid fugitives, they taught children how to read, regardless of color or gender. They gave away a dress, a scarf, a pair of woolen mittens, a warm coat. They held the shaking hand and they soothed the crying child. They stretched their meals and welcomed tired strangers into their homes. They spent time thinking about enslaved men, women, and children and taking special pains to articulate the particular danger of rape and sexual abuse that female slaves endured. And they got angry, and they got frustrated, and they got disheartened with the pace of reform. They attended meetings, they talked and listened to guest lecturers. They traveled from their homes to attend conferences. They sold abolitionist literature, thereby supporting the central organizations that were expanding the reach of abolitionism. They organized, they agitated, they wrote letters and corresponded with women who were taking similar steps. They collected money and gave away some of their own. They prayed and agitated for their church to take a stand against enslavement. And when those churches did not all of them did, when they did not, those women switched religious affiliations. They cried, they sympathized, they exposed themselves to public ridicule so that they could bear testimony against the sin of slaveholding. They knew that to remain silent was not an option. The real question before us is, that's what they did. What are we going to do?
Amen.
What are we going to do? A lot. That's what we need to do. And then we have some great speakers tonight. Some of them I've just met. And can't wait to hear what they have to say. Before that, there was the New York State Assembly agreed to a proclamation honoring what we're doing here today. This is a citation, whereas the great state is only as strong as its history, such as Abolition History Day, which stands as a powerful reminder to honor the courage of those who challenged injustice to serve to others while preserving Utica's remarkable history to educate and inspire future generations. And whereas the 1835 riot demonstrated true power of unity, revealing not only the challenges faced by reformers, but also the profound strength of Utica, a community bound by purpose and perseverance, standing as a beacon of resilience that triumphs over fear and oppression through patience, courage, and unwavering resolve to create lasting change. And whereas Abolition History Day not only honors a pivotal movement in Utica's past, but also calls upon all New Yorkers to reflect on the values of dignity, equality, and justice, and to reaffirm their commitment to these principles in face of ongoing challenges. Resolved that a duly elected member of the State Assembly, I recognize Hope Chapel, A.M.E. Zion Church, Abolition History Day, and that's signed by Marianne Bushner.
Button shop.
She's not here to Okay, so we're going to start with former professor at Utica University, Jan DeAmicis. He is of the Utica County Freedom Trail Commission. So, Jan.
I'm Jan DeAmicis. I retired from Utica University. It was Utica College. I didn't retire from Utica University in 2016. And in 2001, I attended a talk by Hugh Humphreys. And he gave a talk about the Underground Railroad in New York State.
about which I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. And after the talk, he said every county ought to have a group studying its own Underground Railroad history. And I looked around, I raised my hand, does Oneida County have a group like that? And he said, no. I said, I'll start one right here now. And in faculty, Leonard Wynn, a retired social studies teacher from Riceboro, he said, and I'll join your group. And a week later, Hilda Jordan from Rome joined the committee as well. And from that point on, we started to accumulate more information and more information and more. And our problem became, how do we get this information out to the public? Because it's not only for us to do for fun, it's part of our long-range program to make this part of everyday knowledge of the people of Oneida County. So we were organized to study the Underground Railroad and the abolition movement in Oneida County. And the first thing I need to do is explain the word abolition. Because people say, oh, those were people who were against slavery. The abolition movement was against slavery. But it was more than that. The word abolition conveyed the notion that enslaved people should be freed immediately, without compensation. Immediatism became what made it a radical idea. Radical, so radical that people were killed in the process of trying to protect the abolition movement. The right to free speech, the ability to stand up and protest injustice, to protest bad laws, and in fact to find some way to contest bad laws. And they faced the abolitionists. We were talking from about 1830 onwards, the greatest moral crisis that the Republic had faced. And that was, of course, the crisis of enslavement. And it raised the fundamental moral question: what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean for people to be enjoy the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Should everybody be included in the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And what are the ideals to which we want to live up to? And how far from those ideals are we? And what can we do about it? And at the time, in 1835, when 600 men met in Oneida County, they met in Utica, about 40 miles away from where we are, they were addressing this great moral crisis, the crisis of what do we do about enslavement. A little context. The Utica riot was in 1835, and the context is Utica had only been a city for 4 years by then, actually 3 years. Utica was a young city. In 1830, about 12,000 people, 13,000 people. In 1830, there were more than 2 million enslaved people in the United States. Almost all of them were in the South. Delaware still had some, Maryland still, but almost all of them were in the South, and many of them in the Deep South. There were about 300,000 free people of color. So altogether, African Americans constituted about 1 out of every 4 Americans. 1 out of every 4 or every 5. That is to say, they were not a marginal group out there. So they were part of the substance of the population. But 2 million were enslaved. What do we do about this? The word abolition, a radical idea, the idea that you are going to free these people immediately, raised a lot of opposition for a number of reasons. For one thing, as soon as you start to dangle the reward of freedom, are these people going to rebel? Are they going to take the idea that we could be free, and are they going to make you free themselves? In fact, the South lived through decades of deadly fear of slave uprising. And there were slave uprisings over and over and over again, most of which we've never heard of publicly, but there was rebellion. Even in New York State, even in New York City, there were slave uprisings. People wanted to be free. So what if you let them know that it's possible? What if they read abolition literature? What if they hear someone give a talk? What if they have a convention? So none of that word got past the Mason-Dixon line. Abolition literature was burned before it could arrive. When it came to the post office, they threw it away. There was no way that that word was going to get south, and there was no way that enslaved people were going to hear it. You have to realize that the monetary value of enslaved people, I mean, if you were an owner of an enslaved person, then maybe they figure in the Confederate Army, they say, well, most of them were in the slave owners. No, most soldiers in the Confederate Army were part of the slave-owning
slaveocracy because they had families that were profiting from enslavement. So the value of a young, let's say 25-year-old, healthy, enslaved man at the time would have been about 1830, would have been about $1,500. Pocket change, right? Multiply that by 70. And now you're talking about real money. So when you start to think about 2 million enslaved people, you have to say, what was the monetary value of 2 million enslaved people? And it turned out that the value of the enslaved people in the United States was greater than the value of all the manufacturing and all of the wharves and all the shipping in the North. So of course they didn't want to emancipate their enslaved people. And if they did emancipate their enslaved people, where were these folks going to work? They were going to compete with other working people, with other working class people. And that was a problem. And of course, the biggest problem was the underlying prejudice, the underlying racism that was behind all of this fear and all of this suspicion. If you grew up in Oneida County, if you were living here in 1835, you wouldn't have seen any of that. There were no enslaved people in Oneida County by then. Slavery officially ended in 1827. By 1835, you might have seen African Americans. There weren't that many that were living here either. But you could live your whole life in many parts of Oneida County without ever seeing a person of color. So the idea of slavery to most northern people was a pretty academic idea. Whoever saw a slave, everybody knows they're happy. Everybody knows they're getting 3 squares a day. Everybody knows they're getting new shoes every Christmas. Everybody knows that they're better off than a northern worker. Quote, everybody knows, right? So the idea of giving emancipation raised a lot of opposition amongst not only the southern white population, but a lot of northern white people as well. So that on October 21, in 1835, it was no surprise that when 600 men, both black and white, indeed black men from Oneida County, appeared in the Presbyterian Church at 120 Bleecker Street. There is now a parking lot there. The church is long gone. 600 men met there in order to establish the New York State Anti-Slavery Society. They met an hour early because they knew that there would be a mob that was going to drive them, that was going to threaten them, and so they met an hour early, but the mob showed up anyhow. And as these 600 men are gathered and they read the proclamation, we established the New York State Anti-Slavery Society, the mob broke through. Hundreds of men. They've got sticks, they've got stones, they've got all intention of beating the devil out of you. And they were represented by some of the most outstanding citizens of Oneida County. Representative Samuel Beardsley, the United States representative of the Congress. He was one of the leaders of the mob. And Judge Chester Hayden, the highest ranking judge in the county, he was another leader of the mob. The mob was not just angry white men, it was, quote, respectable white men as well. Men of gentlemen of property and standing, as it was called. And so they threatened these men. These were mostly very peaceful folks. And how they get to Utica at first, but they had to travel for days to get there. They were not ready to fight tooth and nail. So they had to adjourn. But before they adjourned, up stood Garrett Smith. Garrett Smith was a rich man from Peterborough, New York, about 25 miles away. And Garrett Smith was not really an abolitionist. He was kind of on the middle. What do we do about African Americans? Well, maybe we should send them to college, a colony in Africa. He was a colonist. But he was so outraged at the violation of free speech. How can poor people make themselves known if you drive them out of the public sphere? Come to Peterborough, he said, and we will convene our mission, our convention there, and we will establish for sure the New York State Anti-Slavery Society. Now, it wasn't only how nice we're going to actually meet in Peterborough, it was that Garrett Smith at that point becomes an abolitionist and dedicates his fortune. He was one of the 5 richest men in America, right around the corner in Peterborough, dedicates his fortune to the cause of abolitionism. In a lot of ways, he was a game changer. But it's not, this program is not about Garrett Smith, it's about anti-slavery and abolition in Oneida County. So they yelled, the crowd, treason, fanatics, threatening to beat them up. In fact, after the mob were satisfied, they went to an abolitionist newspaper and they trashed the newspaper. They were just so angry. And then they went to Alvin Stewart's home, and they were going to beat up Alvin Stewart, but he had a couple of friends with guns and they couldn't get in. It was a violent mob. They were looking for blood. So 400 people end up in Peterborough, and they make the formal establishment, but the story doesn't end there. From that point on, Utica and Oneida County in general, but Utica in particular becomes a center of the anti-slavery movement in New York State, which meant it was one of the centers in the entire country, because New York State was at the center of the anti-slavery movement. And in Utica, we had African Americans who were involved as Underground Railroad operatives. If you know where Post Street is, most people don't. If you know where the Utica Central Bus Transfer Station is on Bleecker Street, there's a little street from here to the door. It's called Post Street. It used to be bigger than that. And if you were a black person living in Utica in the 1830s, you probably lived on Post Street. They had rooming houses, they had bars, they had individual homes. It was a mixed community, but if you were black, that's where you probably lived. And we know that this community on Post Street were heavily involved in helping people on the Underground Railroad. I better mention, what's the Underground Railroad? You know, I was 20 before I realized it wasn't a real railroad. That's why I'm not doing poetry. I want things, the Underground Railroad. But you all have an intuitive sense of what that means. A series of safe houses where people could hide people who were being chased by slave catchers and went from house to house to house. But it started here in Utica. And why did it start in Utica? Because slave catchers would get off the canal looking for a place to get a haircut, looking for a place to get a meal, looking for a place to bed down, and the cook would be black, and the person who helped you unload the boat would be black, and the person who was going to cut your hair would be black, and he or she, because she was washing your clothes, would come back to Post Street, and they would let you know. And that's where they hid freedom seekers, and that's where they helped the Underground Railroad take place. So the Underground Railroad starts here in Utica and spreads out throughout Oneida County. 1830, there were no anti-slavery societies in Oneida County. 1837, there are now 20. It happened just like that. Oneida County becomes the center of the abolition movement. I'm going to switch here because I'm going to use this platform to let you know how you can learn more about Utica and abolitionism in Utica and in Oneida County, and especially Black history. Because one of the things that we've encountered as we study the abolition movement and the Underground Railroad is the central role that African Americans played. Small population here, but absolutely central. And as Deirdre talked about how women were involved in many, many ways, African Americans were part of the first time that black and white people worked together on a common cause. Because you might protect an enslaved person, a runaway, a freedom seeker, but where are you going to send them? Well, you might send them to a white Underground Railroad station, and then he or she would send them to another station and another station. And black people were the first people that these runaways would run into, and then Uticans, African Americans, would then help to distribute them to safe houses around the county. What I want to go switch gears now is what's going on with respect to studying the history of abolition and the Underground Railroad, not only in Oneida County, but throughout the state. First of all, I want to mention the Oneida County Freedom Trail that Deirdre mentioned. It was started in 2001, and we've been going strong since then. I knew absolutely nothing about it. Most of us knew nothing about it. Some very well-known people, Frank Tomato, for instance, he brings his perspective. The committee has come and gone. I'm proud to say that we have 5 people on the committee right now. 3 of them are in this room right now. It's been part of our job not only to study, but to bring our information to the public one way or another. One way we do that is the brochure. Hold on a second.
We got time.
I'm going to be downstairs after we're done, but there's a brochure that we produced about 15, 20 years ago that gives you an idea of all the Underground Railroad locations in Oneida County. It needs to be updated, but I'll have some of these to distribute. And then what we have here is a walking tour of Utica's abolition and Underground Railroad sites. Self-guided. You take this, you can follow it yourself. Or you can make an arrangement with me and Mary Hayes Gordon to give you a guided tour, but this allows you to study Utica's important Underground Railroad sites. It takes about an hour. There are 5 different stops and so forth, but you can walk away from this and get started on learning about local Underground Railroad history. United County now has 5 National Park Service sites. We have a website. We celebrate Juneteenth, and we have a noted author, Deirdre, who has written about slavery in United County, well, runaway slavery. We also have the United County Black History Archives. Many of you have never heard of this. Cassandra Harris and I have each been doing research on Black history. She's going to cut the book. It's located in Hamilton College, 2 minutes away. It's Hamilton College, and they have in their special collections all the research that she did, that I did, and that Professor Paul Young did, and it's all in one place. We need to have that done. The Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State has a website. We also are sponsoring the Harriet Tubman Historic Scenic Byway that will go through United County. Finally, the National Abolition Hall of Fame, which is in Peterborough, which is where Garrett Smith's estate was. They celebrate Emancipation Day, they celebrate Watch Night, they celebrate Juneteenth, and they celebrate the Abolition Walk, which took place a week ago from Canastota down to Peterborough. So my history lesson is that not only have we found a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of ways that you guys can all get involved in finding out more stuff for yourself.
All right, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody piano. So I come from a background where we talk about freedom. I want you all to be free. So where I come from, if somebody on the microphone says something, you got to respond back to the person on the microphone. So I'm going to try it one more again. That's not proper English for educators. Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you. I'm the substitute today. The person that was supposed to be here today is under the weather, and she was having some health challenges. She didn't give me no notes, and the lady in the front in charge is telling me that I'm supposed to sing something. I'm not a singer, but I gathered from the guy that just sat down, what I took away from the abolition part was, between the abolition and the Underground Railroad, there had to be some kind of discomfort. And a lot of times when you're transitioning, whether it's coming from freedom into slavery or bonding back into freedom or whatever, there's some kind of uncomfortable. Right now, I'm very uncomfortable because I'm not a singer.
The singers are here, though.
The singers are here.
Yes. Amen. What? Just go on and ask her.
Can somebody give us a picture on the electrolytes? The ones who know.
Okay. Okay. Is the microphone? Can you give them the microphone? Have them push the microphones up so they'll know how to.
It's been a while, but we have to take y'all way back.
Amen.
Nobody knows. knows the trouble lasts. Hey? Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Oh, yes, Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. Sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, my Lord. And sometimes I'm almost level to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Oh, yes. Glory, yes. Hallelujah. Now if you get to heaven before I do, oh yes, Lord, I want you to tell all my loved ones I'll be there soon. Oh yes, Lord, nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory,
No, you'll sing another song later.
So you're gonna sing another song.
Let her sit in the front row.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful. We're going to get some more singing. Okay. Our next speaker is a very dynamic organizer. Hilda Jordan is appointed the interim executive director of the Mid-Utica Neighborhood Preservation Corporation, and she's a consultant with H.M.J. Consulting. And welcome up.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Hilda M. Jordan, and I am starting my stopwatch now, so you don't have to Apollo theater cut me off the stage. It is truly an honor to be here with all of you. And first, I want to thank God for just giving us all breath and life and the ability to be here in this moment. And I want to thank all of you for being in the practice of remembering with each of us. Right?
That's right.
The idea of why we're here today is not just to hear about the past and some history, or some story, but to metabolize into something useful for our future.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what I hope we can do, especially at a place like Hope Chapel and with the continued leadership of so many great pioneers, is to make history more accessible. Because I was raised being told, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going, right? And one of the biggest tragedies, quite honestly, is that so many of us don't ever get to learn where we come from.
That's right.
So many of us are never really taught the true history of what it means to even be from Utica. And I was one of those young people. So most of you know me. I grew up in Utica. My mother is a Dominican immigrant, soy 100% Latina. I'm 100% Afro-Latina, but I am purely American. And I say this with all of the strength of what a Harvard degree in racism taught me. That Black racial identity really transcends ethnic lines, right? And what it means to be Black and what it means to have a Black racialized experience is something that we still wrestle with day in and day out because of the legacy of slavery. And in that same way, though, we don't often talk about the shortcomings and the pain of our history. We also often ignore the other individuals who were not the prime and key speaker, but who fueled the movement. As we talk about the commemoration of the 190th Abolition meeting, we often we heard the name of Deirdre Sinnott, and we hear the names of some key Black figures as well, and we're probably going to hear a few more of those. And out of 600 men, we might hear 2 names or 5, but today I want you to imagine the 595. The people who sat in the pews just like you're doing today, who were also brave and courageous, who didn't have the fame or the notoriety or the title of leader, but whose everyday acts of showing up, of witnessing, of daring to hope for more, are truly what made a change, what made a movement. Because one of the things that we often do when we romanticize the past is we think that it was one individual leader with a fancy title or degree, or a charismatic smile, or a bomb head wrap, right? But really, it was all of us, all of you, all of those who dared to dream and who hope not just as this idyllic feeling, but as this discipline and practice. I see some of those people here right now who hope in the face of limited resources, of finite opportunities, of tragedy after tragedy, of shortcoming after shortcoming, and the question is, how do you do it? When I look at the past, what I get most inspired of now is thinking about what it meant to actually hope in the face of violence that we saw. What did people do the day after the lynching? What did people do the day after the rations ran out? What did people do when the job opportunities really weren't there? We came together, we gathered, we prayed, but we also found joy.
That's right.
Right? One of the greatest things about our historical movements and the darkest periods of our country has been the love that we've been able to anchor into for each other and with each other and amongst the strangers that don't know us left from right, but are like, baby, I've seen you at church a few times, how you doing? Right? Or that neighbor who hasn't seen you, maybe, you know, they see you always grumpy day in and day out, and then all of a sudden you've been gone for 2 weeks, and you're like, hey, what's going on? You need anything?
All right.
Right? Because one of the things that Utica does do at its best, and that its history has taught us, is that we can, in fact, and do, in fact, come together in a time of need. And what our time of need needs now more than ever, truly, is that love and that presence with each other.
That's right.
We're facing times where a disagreement can end a life.
Yes.
But that's not new, especially not for people who look like us. Right? We're talking about what happened, the struggles, the pains, the injustices, weren't just something that was hard to deal with personally, but that externally did and could have cost anyone their lives.
That's right.
Many of us walk with that fear when it comes to our day-to-day interactions. And some of us don't know what that fear even looks like because that's not our reality. And yet you show up still and witness. And we thank you for that. Because you don't have to be here. We know in the way that our climate and our country is working, honestly, the fact that any of us are here is truly a miracle and something I don't take for granted anymore. I think when we're young, it's so easy to imagine what progress is supposed to look like. Activism is very sexy. I have some signs to make. I got my outfit planned, my black rubber boots on. I am ready to go protest. But little do we realize that the protest is in the still open warming door centers after hours. Little do we realize that, and many of us here realize, or maybe some of us watching and those of us who aren't always in this practice of remembering realize that it's that one gesture, that one loaf of bread, that one moment, but that one funding decision, that one letter, that one grant, that can change one life and can change a community. My hope for us today and as we move forward, as we think about history, is to figure out why it is we're really learning history. What is it that we actually want to learn and can learn from the past and not repeat ourselves? One of the funny things that I just learned as I heard Professor Jan speak was that in about 5 years after the first assembly meeting, there were 20 anti-slavery organizations. And I was like, wow, that's like the Mohawk Valley. Right? We're big on creating nonprofits. And one of the things that I realized, like, wow, we maybe still try and solve problems in that same way. Independently, alone, a new organization, a new founding, and yet we forget about the history that was already laid before us. Some of the work that I do today as a consultant really has to do with knowledge sharing processes, because I truly believe we have everything we need to succeed.
That's right.
But it's a matter of being able to communicate and collaborate to get that out into the world and to also reach the best versions of ourselves. I believe in a God that made us perfect in all of our ways, and I mean that in the sense that we were divinely created with a purpose. There are things that you individually can do that only you can do because of who you are.
That's right.
And that's why I invoke the memory of those 595, because there were things that they did to make sure that we would all still be here remembering that day.
Yes.
When we look to leaders, or when we listen to leaders, they often say that it's their team that makes it all happen. And we take that as fluff. But as you grow, and as I started to grow with the privilege and also the burden of community leadership, and I say burden with the charge of the weight of am I doing it right? Knowing that it will never be enough, but trying anyways, of wondering how can I better connect and lead and learn from the history and from each of you here in this room. My goal in trying to learn history and trying to lead MUNPC into hopefully another 45 years of history is to make sure and to try and build the foundation so that our future generations, when faced with the new moral crisis of their generation and their dilemma, don't ask, well, what did they do in the past? They can see moments like this and realize that we've done what we've always do. Gathered, prayed, and found joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful to hear from you. Our next speaker is a collaborator, Kei Williams, Community Manager and Story Guide of Black Gotham Experience, who is also a part of the steering committee of the Oneida County Freedom Trail Commission and a good friend. So welcome.
Good evening, family.
Good evening.
It's really good to be here today, not just as a speaker, but as someone who calls, obviously, the state, the city, the soil home. Many of you know me, familiar faces, many of you raised me in the churches across New York, right? And so I'm really glad to be here. As someone whose godfather was a member of this church, and as someone who was raised to pay attention, to speak up, and to always do the right thing. I moved away from home 17 years ago, and I always make it my business to come back. But I'm going to talk a lot about being a New Yorker and what it means to be in this work as a historian. So when I tell people I'm a native New Yorker, right? You know, there's a big difference between downstate New York and upstate New York, right? And so, just for example, when I'm offered a black and white cookie, I might kind of turn my nose up and say, it's not a real half moon. You know, it's a little bit more crispy. It's got icing, it's got a frosting. It's not the real thing, you know. And once I brought a tomato pie back home for the holidays to my colleagues, and I was very disgusted when they put it in the microwave. Same, right? Instead of just eating it at room temperature like you're supposed to. And so to be a native New Yorker is one thing, and to be from this small town, though, means something else to me. And to me, it means a lot to stand here in Utica, in the oldest black church, a city that holds a powerful, if often unrecognized, place in the story of American abolition. Too often when we talk about abolition, people immediately think of the South, they think of cotton fields, plantations, the Mason-Dixon line, but the truth is some of the most radical, courageous, and visionary organizing happened right here in the North.
That's right.
And happened right here in Utica.
That's right.
Even for myself, it wasn't until November of 2015 when I was taken on a walk into our Manhattan by comrades, the Black Gotham Experience, that I learned of this difference. Black Gotham Experience is a storytelling project funded by Kamal Ware, who as a black story guide and tour guide for the Tenement Museum was asked a simple question by a 9-year-old little girl. Kamal had led them through this kind of dynamic walk for 2 hours. The Tenement Museum is in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It's an institution that's been there for years, and it's for folks when they arrive to New York, they often go there to learn about the immigrant experience of New York City, right? So everybody that comes to New York or comes to America comes to the Ellis Island, and there's all these tenements, and like the good romanticized stories, Statue of Liberty, everything else, right? And so Kamal is giving this walk to this group of young kids, ages of 9 to 10, and he's throwing these kids really easy questions. So I'm gonna offer up for the room for some engagement. If I were to ask you, what year did Christopher Columbus sail the ocean blue? 1492, right? Or if I were to ask you, what year was the Declaration of Independence signed?
1776.
Right? So we all have these common facts of the matter. This little girl who was stone-faced the entire time and didn't really entertain Kamal's stories, and to the end, she raised her hand and she asked him one simple question. Where are all the black people? Where are all the black people? And here's a scholar who had just led this 2-hour walk in the Tenement Museum, recording facts and history, and had no answer for this little 9-year-old black girl. So this led Kamal to creating the Black Gotham Experience, and 15 years later, the project has been commissioned for 15 different storytelling projects that capture the African diaspora and its impact in New York State. And I've had the honor of contributing to several of these projects, including Northrop, which is a walking tour about Solomon Northrop's wife, and Northrop, the award-winning More Than a Broke walking tour, which discusses Brooklyn's role in abolition in the 19th century. And most recently, we were commissioned by the New School to write a walk called Brother Malcolm, which is the first of its kind walk dedicated to covering Malcolm X as a sibling and what it means to be of the people. And so that practice, this practice that we have here in Black churches, this practice of oral history, right, is important for our memory.
That's right.
At Black Gotham, we honor this practice through the model, through the practice and principle of remembering together. Remembering together through walks, talks, and experiences. And so as you've heard tonight, Utica is ripe with history. And as part of my research as a Mellon Fellow, stewarded by my mentor, Tabo Bo, who's now at Brown University, I found myself as a movement builder, as an abolitionist, as a believer of transformative justice. I was reckoning and trying to find the source of this fire that was in my spirit. And for me, that meant diving into the history of my hometown, Utica, New York, and uncovering the very research that Jan talked about tonight of the Oneida County Freedom Trail Commission, which was the foundation of my work and has led to a walking tour that I developed myself called Menace to Society, because Black folks always cast as menaces, even when we're just here to fight for our freedom and our rights. And this is part of an ongoing multimedia project and a soon coming book. So in 1835 at Back Square Hotel, just blocks from where we are right now, there's this inaugural meeting of the New York State Anti-Slavery Society, which was violently disrupted by a mob. But that wasn't the end of that story, right? And as Jan said, it was just the beginning. That meeting moved to the home of Garrett Smith and nearby Peterborough, and that work continued. And that's the thing about social movements.
That's right.
They don't stop when they're attacked.
That's right.
They adapt, they relocate, and they persist. Utica was a stop on the Underground Railroad. It was a city where free Black residents and white abolitionists alike risked their safety to fight against slavery and injustice. And that history should make us proud and should also make us reflect. Because as much as that era of abolition changed this country, the struggle for freedom didn't end with emancipation. The systems that upheld slavery evolved into segregation, into mass incarceration, into disparities in housing, healthcare, and education that we still see today. So when we talk about the importance of social movements, we're not just talking about the past, we're talking about right now. We're talking about organizers, young people, educators, and everyday people who are still pushing for just a little more of a just society. And so whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's climate justice, indigenous sovereignty, immigrants' rights, labor movements, social change has always come from the ground up, y'all. It's always come from the ground up. And so that's the legacy of abolition in Utica. That's not just bravery, but persistence. Not just resistance, but vision, a belief that we don't have to accept injustice as normal, and that ordinary people, united by a cause, can remake society.
That's right.
And let's be honest, we still have a long way to go. But the road ahead isn't unfamiliar. We've walked it before, in this very city. And with the same courage and collective effort, we can walk it again. Alright, we can walk it again. So, I'm not closing. I always like to end any space that I'm in with this poem from Audre Lorde called A Litany for Survival. And so I'm going to read that and then my closing. So it's called A Litany for Survival from Audre Lorde. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who live in doorways coming and going, and the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who are imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid when our mother's milk provide this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hope to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid. It might not remain. And when the sun sets, we are afraid. It might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. And when our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid that that love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid that that love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard, nor welcome. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak remembering that we were never meant to survive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kei. This meeting is really getting to me. I'm so glad that the Reverend found that poster. Got in touch with us to be able to bring people together here to talk about where we are going and where we've been. Tabo Bo of Nomadic Races is a Utica University grad of Karen descent, who was born in a refugee camp and who grew up in Utica, availing himself of programs like the Thea Bowman House, Young Scholars, and Utica Frontiers, who now works as a cyber security professional.
I would like to say thank you. I would like to express my gratitude and say thank you to Deirdre, Mary Jordan for inviting me to speak, and of course, everyone here who has been in attendance and the speakers. I think, I speak for all of us that every speech here has been very powerful. I'm just a loss for words, quite honestly. But I'm grateful to be part of this collective because today is a day where we honor a group of people in the Utica area who decided that what they were fighting for was meaningful enough to come together to voice their opinion, their freedom, and the support for the abolishment of slavery. When I was first asked to do this, I immediately said yes because Mary was the one asking me. And in our culture, in our Eastern culture, we tend to say yes to others, even though we may not have a concrete plan. That could be for bad reasons and for good reasons. I think today in particular is for a good reason. But if many of you guys know, I'm in Young Scholars. Mary was a mentor of mine in the Young Scholars program, so of course I have to say yes. But then, as I started to think about what to write for today, I started second-guessing myself, quite honestly. I started battling the idea if I should write a poem or a speech because some may know me as a poet in the area. I started battling the idea if I was even fit enough to write about the topic of abolition. I'm no historian. I don't really read that much either, to be quite honest, but I've tried. Then I started to think about, how can I relate to the audience? What do I, as a Karen refugee, have in common with an African American that lived through the abolitionist movement? And I realized that the proof is in the pudding. It's right there. We have a very similar story. We were both forced to leave our original homes, both forced to rely on someone else's mercy. And although I don't necessarily agree with the saying that history tends to repeat itself, I definitely think that there's patterns. I was born in a refugee camp in 2000, right in the middle of the jungle, where the Thai government built this placement camps, for people being persecuted out of their homeland. And I'm sure some of you may know about the story or know someone who has been impacted. And even though I personally didn't live through the trauma of fleeing from my home or constantly watching my back, and to be honest, I don't even remember being hungry that much. But my parents made sure that these voices and stories still live through me, just like the experiences your ancestors went through. They want to make sure that their voices and their stories live on which is exactly why we are here gathered today, right on 751 South Street.
Right.
These stories have shaped our experience. These stories have shaped our experience to the people we have become. Maybe one of us here, may write the next Emancipation Proclamation, or maybe we're just here to exercise our freedom of speech, or just feel the need to share information. When I was writing the speech, I consulted with a bunch of friends and mentors, and one of the questions that stood out to me was, what is echoing from the past that we still feel and hear today? And since we were talking about abolition, the first thing that I could think of is slavery. The concept of slavery, it's always been so appalling to me. The concept of exploiting someone else for personal benefits still exists to this day, some more striking than others, but I digress. Which is why I wanted to shed some light and spread some awareness of what is happening on the other side of the world. Currently, there are hundreds of thousands of slaves forced to scam in Southeast Asia, also known as the Golden Triangle, which consists of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, Thailand, and Laos, and sometimes even Cambodia, depending on who you're talking to. The human trafficking there is fueled by fake jobs that lures victims to these regions. So they would make these jobs feel as legitimate as possible. And they would even offer them to fly them out to these areas. And once they get there, they would confiscate them of all their belongings and all their passports. And then they're forced to pretty much be slaves and scam a lot of the Western culture, the Western side of the world, and other countries. And if they don't meet their quotas, they're physically and psychologically get tortured. A lot of these scam sites are protected by local militia groups and Chinese criminal organizations, and you can do your own research on these type of stuff, but it kind of gets deeper and deeper, crazier and crazier. But these scam centers are making billions of dollars in revenues. So the constant text messages that you guys are getting, those fake emails that you guys are getting, there's a good chance that it's a slave doing the work for the benefit of someone much richer and much more powerful. So the reason why I bring this up is, of course, because I am biased. I work in the cybersecurity, so it involves my profession. But it also relates to what we're talking about today, that history doesn't necessarily repeat, but if you look close enough, a pattern definitely emerges. And today's slaves may not look the same from 200 years ago, but slaves definitely still exist. And it's in our phones. And we still have to fight for what is right.
That's right.
Which is part of the reason why I also agreed to speak. Because I know it will give me a reason to share information and listen to everyone else's information and viewpoint as well. And so ever since the dawn of human history, we have always come together to help each other solve problems, share information and voice our perspective. For that reason, I like to think that we evolve just a little more. The more we learn about each other, the less ignorant we become, and the more humane we become. And today in Brighton News, there are people around the north. A bunch of protests spewing all over the world, mainly led by young people, Gen Z. Not me in particular. So you got Nepal, Morocco, Indonesia, Madagascar. If you guys follow news, you guys may have seen heard some of these protests and revolutions somewhat piling up. Many of these people are unhappy with their government. They're tired of being treated unfairly and are hungry for change. Now, I'm not hinting that our country needs a revolution, but it certainly does need a change.
Yeah, it's a revolution.
You see, I believe that if we really want to abolish slavery, we first have to study its history, we recognize the voices, and we must abolish it in all forms. And as Martin Luther King Jr. once said in his letter from Birmingham jail, you guys can finish this? with me. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your voice. Okay, so we have one more speaker, but before that, I think we're going to have some more music and some more singing. So our singers will come up, and then after that, Reverend Baugh is going to come up and speak. So.
Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. There must be a God somewhere. What happens when you don't rehearse, you don't know what you're singing? You did great, everybody. You always like to throw in the experience or something.
Okay, Reverend Baugh.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We live in a difficult time right now.
Oh, yes.
And because we live in a difficult time, in a time that people want you to forget the truth of history.
Yes. All right, come on now.
Because what they're presenting today is not new.
That's right.
And because it's not new, they don't want you to know that has happened before. This is a legacy of work that must be done together. They're trying to get us to silo ourselves with those devices, protest for a moment instead of a movement, instead of coming together, understanding we are one humanity. We stand in a moment of deep moral crisis. More than the economic crisis, more than wars, morally. Do you hear me? Morally. Today, killing can be justified. Starvation can be justified. Truth turned into lies can be justified. We're at a moral crisis. It used to be a time if you stole even to feed your family, no one would say it's right. We understand what you did, but we still say it's wrong.
That's right.
Today, we say it's right. And so, nearly 200 years ago, we refused to accept the moral injustice of the moment. And we have to regain that moral integrity once again. Civil laws are on the books. They're part of the Constitution. They're laws. That is not what's being threatened. What is being threatened is the enforcement of laws. After African Americans were set free, Jim Crow laws came about, even though they were set free, because the government had to come in and enforce the law. If you have laws, have no enforcement by themselves. You can steal, kill, and destroy, but you need a police force to make laws become a reality. That's why the Department of Education was under attack first thing. Because really on the federal level, the Department of Education enforced the segregation laws. The Department of Justice enforced the voting laws. Now we have lost Section 5 of the Voting Act, but Section 2 is going to the Supreme Court. Once those two laws are no longer on the books, voting rights will still be a law, but no enforcement. So if I tell you you can't vote unless you pay me, there's no one to go to. Because unless you have money to take it to the Supreme Court. That's where we're at as a nation. The last 60 years, it's not DEI. DEI is not the issue. Civil rights is the issue. They're dismantling all the work that was done. All the work that was marched and bled and died for has been practically dismantled. Because enforcement is no longer. Can you imagine? Murder is still against the law. But unless you have someone to enforce it, what does the law mean? And so, I ask you tonight to consider what is going on today. What is at stake today? Because what is happening is that we must, as a civilization, come together and morally object to what is happening. If we do not, we will not have the America that we have today.
Right. That's right.
This celebration is about the past to help us forge a better tomorrow. To have our children understand that you can't social media your way out of this. We must come together and see each other as individuals, as people, as children of God, and the very right to exist and to have certain alienable rights that cannot be taken from us. And so I ask each and every one of you, after this moment is done, we all have to do our part. We have to, first of all, we have to understand what's going on.
That's right.
That understanding will help you know what you're fighting.
That's right.
And so, I beg of you, number one, start to read. Because, or audiobook. All right? Let's start to read. Start with Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America. Understand that poverty in a capitalist country, if they didn't make money off of it, we wouldn't have poor.
That's right. That's right.
Money is what counts in America.
Amen. That's so true.
Start there. Understand the poor is not poor because they're lazy or because they don't work or because they want a handout. Understand people make money off of them. And they're disenfranchised because they want to continue to make money off of them. And I'm going to tell you, even with the immigration policy, as long as immigrants came across this border and for generations we could use them to pick our food and not pay them, it was fine. But as soon as their children became the doctors and the lawyers and corporate America, America never got over slavery. They always want cheap labor. And we're complicit. That's why you got to read the book. Walmart don't have low prices because they pay a living wage. And so I'm asking each of us to take real responsibility, or in my tradition, be your brother's keeper.
That's right.
Now, I wrote something, I have to say this. SNAP payments may be stopped come November 1st.
Yeah.
The cruelty of doing it at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so, places like Hope Chapel have to figure out, because this church is in the midst of poverty. We have to figure out what we're going to do. But wherever you worship or work or organizations you're with, you're going to have to be part of that solution until hopefully we can change the administration. All right? I'm asking you to be part of help. Because while at some point you got to go upstream to find out who's pushing the bodies in that we're pulling out, we still have to pull them out. And so I beg of you to keep that in your consciousness and in your soul and in your heart.
Yes.
And come November, you may have to give more and do more so people can have basic food. Our cities are not bombed to the ground like Gaza But if you prevent people from eating, what's the difference?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
If you make healthcare so expensive, then and your children and your family die of preventable diseases and causes, what is the difference? And so, I thank all of you for coming out tonight. But keep your eye on what happens November 1st. Because we normally are not a soup kitchen. We may have to become one.
Yeah.
That's right. There's a missionary benediction that we say. May the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent from one another. Amen. Amen. Oh, here's some food and donuts and cider downstairs.
One last thing. I feel like we were remiss if we did not sing the first verse of Lift Every Voice and Sing before we left.
Okay.
I wrote something for it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not a solo. I'm a choir singer.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the heart holy of mercy. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let every town loud as the roaring sea.
Amen. Sing a song.